Thank you for checking out another episode of the Restricted Area Podcast. We have trades, we have trade requests, we had the draft, we've had just so much in the last 2 weeks. I know it's been a little over 2 weeks since we last spoke. Of course, that was when the Denver Nuggets were crowned NBA champions, and it is now July 2nd. And don't worry, I've got Twitter on standby just in case something big happens. No, we're not going to talk about Eric Gordon signing with the Suns. Well, maybe we'll talk about the Suns on the whole. Yeah, we had a Bradley Beal trade. Never even got to speak about that. Although I don't think that's nearly as big of a deal as some are making it out to be. We're going to get into everything. I really want to talk about the Celtics a little bit, of course, because the Marcus Smart and the Porzingis thing. I kind of had a moment today where I've been so in on Porzingis, and I've just been like so excited for him to be a Celtic that I almost kind of forgot that it meant we lost Marcus Smart. And so then I was writing in my notes what we were going to talk about today, and I had to write that Marcus Smart was traded, of course, and I was just like, God dang, like it's not going to really set in until the season comes. It's just been such a long ride. It's been a damn near 10-year ride with Marcus Smart as a Celtic. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it. The NBA playoffs drained me. In retrospect, maybe it would have been best if the Celtics just got swept by Miami. Would have just lowered my expectations. Wouldn't have been so taxing. I think I lost probably a couple years. Lost a couple years watching that series. So it was nice to have a nice little refresh, reset. Of course, the NBA does not stop, and the Bradley Beal trade followed the finals pretty shortly thereafter, and then, of course, the Marcus Smart deal. And a lot has taken place. We now have a Damian Lillard trade request, and he's probably going to... It seems like he's locked to go to Miami, and, that is what it is. Of course, we have... anytime we're in the NBA offseason, we have social media investigators, and Tyler Hero has now removed all the Miami stuff from his Twitter, and also Twitter is broken for the most part. I can't believe it. And it feels like NBA free agency had something to do with that, right? Because why of all days was it July 1st that Twitter breaks, right? So pretty inconvenient timing because we're not able to be fully up to date on everything as we usually are. But nonetheless, so much has happened. I have opinions on all of it. And I think there's no better place to start than 2 weeks ago. Or 2 weeks ago-ish. The Marcus Smart and Kristaps Porzingis deal. Of course, Marcus gets dealt to Memphis. The Celtics not only get the best player in the trade back, but they also get 2 first-round picks, one of which was the 25th pick in this year's draft. You know the story by now. They drafted Marcus Sasser, traded him, and then they've acquired like 1 million second-round picks for future use. They drafted Jordan Walsh, who, there's I'm in the Celtics like Twitter and Instagram spaces, and some people are treating Jordan Walsh like he's the second coming of Michael Jordan. I think that's just, standard stuff. You draft one guy, you get really excited about him. But the reality is, like, this guy's not going to play much next year. I mean, he's got a crack at maybe being a rotation guy. Maybe. It's not likely, especially the Celtics just acquired O'Shea Brissett, and that kind of feels like somebody who's going to round out the bottom of the rotation. But nonetheless, exciting prospect. He was number 10 in his high school class. Number 9, for context, was Brandon Miller, the number 2 overall pick in the draft, which, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but MJ screwed Charlotte just one last time. There's no way. And I mean, there is a way. There are a lot of people whose opinions I really respect who had Miller over Scoot Henderson. I'm sorry, I'm not one of those people. I have gone back countless times to rewatch film, video, whenever on Brandon Miller, and I see it. Like, I see that he's a talented player. I see the size. I see the athleticism. I see the scoring chops, the shooting ability. I do. But but he's drawing these like Paul George and like Tatum type comparisons that I'm sorry, like when I go back and I watch Paul George in college, when I watch Jason Tatum in college, when I watch these high scoring, ball handling, playmaking wings, at that age, they just looked like they were at another level compared to Brendan Miller. Brendan Miller, I would have taken probably the Thompson twins above him. I mean, and maybe I'm dead wrong on this. I'm not dying on this hill. It's not that big of a deal. I don't even know how I've already gone off on a Charlotte Hornets tangent. But nonetheless, it'll tie in at some point here because we're going to talk about Damian Lillard and, of course, the fact that they drafted Scoot Henderson. And it makes you wonder if maybe they did take Brandon Miller at number 3. Is Damian Lillard still making this trade request? Ultimately, probably. Because positionally, it's a little bit different. Maybe Portland could sell Dame on the fact that, like, hey, give this kid 2-3 years, and we think he's going to be an all-star, all-NBA type guy. I certainly don't think that, and I think they would have been lying to themselves if they had said that. And Damian Lillard is probably smarter than that, and also knows that he just didn't want to rebuild with anybody. Like, he didn't want to go into this next season with a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old. And that's understandable. But we got to start. We'll retreat here a little bit. Marcus Smart, 2014 draft. I was 14 at the time. Or was I 13? Or no, I may have been. I was 14 or 15 years old when they drafted Marcus Smart. And it's been a long time rooting for him, being a fan. Celtics had only won, I think, 25 games the season before that he arrived. And the Celtics are in a much better place nowadays. And that's not all credit to Marcus Smart, of course. I mean, at no point in time was he, the best player on the team or anything like that. But he was part of this core group that has now seen the Eastern Conference Finals several times, the NBA Finals in 2022. And time again, he just won out as the guy the Celtics should have entrusted that point guard role to. They bring in Kemba Walker, that flames out pretty quickly. They bring in Kyrie Irving, that flames out. He and Isaiah Thomas, I thought, worked really well together. Isaiah, of course, was so small and had the defensive inefficiencies, if you will, and Marcus could often make up for that by guarding the other team's best guard, at least. And no matter what, Marcus was always the guy, and he stayed through all of that. It was never, I don't want to over romanticize what he was in Boston, but also 9 winning seasons with the Celtics. So he was super valued and super important. And I was watching the Brad Stevens interviews after the trade happened, and he looked empty. He looked dead. Like, that is somebody, this isn't like just a new executive rolls up into town and trades the team's most beloved player. Brad Stevens has coached Marcus Smart. They came in at the same year. Marcus was drafted the year that Brad was hired on. And he coached him. They won playoff games together. They went through battles together. Brad has now been the executive of this team for a couple of years now, and didn't want to move off of him despite what everybody else had said and felt. And of course, there's been times where I've been on the trade Marcus Smart bandwagon, but you always come off that because you realize who he is and what he does for this team. And I'm not gonna lie, it really hurt seeing that he was traded. It did. It really hurt. It took me a few days to kind of cut the emotions out of it and realize that it was probably something that had to happen. Something that has been said but probably not talked about enough was the fact that this trade probably had to happen. And if it wasn't, originally it was Malcolm Brogdon in the deal. And at the time, that made a million times more sense. Given his injury history, given his contract, it just kind of made sense. It was like, well, Brogdon was excellent for us this year. He shot the piss out of the ball. Obviously won Sixth Man of the Year. It was so much fun to root for him and watch him. But he felt like the most dispensable of the three guards between Smart, White, and Brogdon. He just felt like the most, replaceable guy. And that all made sense. And then it was Smart, and all of a sudden I was like, I don't know if I wanted to do this deal. But in retrospect, I mean, like 2 weeks removed from it, it's the Celtics won this deal. The Celtics absolutely won this deal. They get Porzingis, and now they've got him signed through. They're going to have him through another 2 years. He's going to extend for 2 years at $30 million a year. He takes a $7 million a year pay cut, and that's $17 million less total than what he could have signed for. And a lot of people would say, well, that's probably fair value for him. I can't help but feel like he could have got paid that max anywhere else. Maybe not anywhere, but I mean, shit, look at Houston. Houston's giving guys who are definitely not as good as Porzingis max type money. I mean, they gave Fred VanVleet was the first max deal of the NBA offseason. Just stupid money. He's making over $42 million a year. And then Dylan Brooks was never going to be a Shanghai Shark. Like, Dylan Brooks has a place in this league. Did he have a pretty... was his playoff run in poor taste? Absolutely. Absolutely it was. Was it embarrassing? Yes. Did he poke LeBron, and did that ultimately come back to haunt them? Yes. Was his time up in Memphis? Absolutely. Absolutely. But was he destined to play overseas? No. He is too good for that. He is too good for that. But he gets a 4-year, $80 million deal in Houston. Okay. That's a lot. That's a lot. And I know what Houston's doing. They have to pay somebody, right? They have to pay somebody. And we're going to get into all this. We're still going to live here on the Boston thing. But 2 weeks removed from it, you can see that they got the best player back. They got draft assets in return as well. They were able to extend Porzingis on a really team-friendly deal. And now you can say, if you're Boston, you have 3 stars. You have a top 5, top 6 player in Jason Tatum. You have another top 20 guy in Jaylen Brown. And then you have a top 40-ish player in Kristaps Porzingis. I mean, Porzingis, man, 23 points, 8 rebounds a game on 40% shooting from the three-point line. As a 7'3" center, I mean, we're all gushing, and rightfully so, about Victor Wembanyama. And hopefully the sky's for the limit for him, and he figures it all out, and he can be healthy, and he can dominate this league for 10, 15 years. Once upon a time, that was Kristaps Porzingis. Once upon a time, it wasn't obviously to the effects or the level of Wembanyama, but once Porzingis was drafted, he kind of broke onto the scene, was pretty damn good. He was so excellent in the season that was it 2017 when he ended up tearing his ACL? That last season with New York, prior to the injury, he was so incredible. And it's taken him a little bit of time, but he's worked his way back up to it. And his game has definitely changed. And I guarantee you, he would tell you that and would admit that. He's 27 years old, right? He's 27 years old. And he no longer does, despite the ability to be able to, despite the freak athleticism that he's always had and still does, you just see it. Like, he's not going up and yamming everything. He's not going up and he's not jumping as high as he can on every block, every possession. He's treating his body with a little bit more care, and he's learned how to play smart and play safer. And he played 65 games last year, and that's including the fact that he was shut down early by the tanking Wizards. So if he had just finished out that season, he would have been over 70 games played. That's incredible. That's incredible. And he comes to Boston now where he's going to be the third guy. There's going to be nights where he's the number 2. There's going to be nights where he's the number 1. And his role has just taken a huge, not a huge hit, but it's going to be reduced now. It's not going to be, when Beal was off the floor last year, Porzingis was far and away the best player and had to shoulder a pretty big load. Now, that's seldom going to be the case. If Tatum and Brown are both active, both healthy, both playing, he's going to benefit greatly from not being the center of attention, and also not having to shoulder such a heavy load night to night. And we saw that with Malcolm Brogdon. Malcolm Brogdon, a notoriously injured hit. His playing career is littered with injuries, but he's always been the starter, always been the lead ball handler, always had a lot asked out of him. And then this year, he goes to the bench. Admittedly, I don't think he ever was comfortable with that, because even in the postseason, after winning Sixth Man of the Year and everything like that, they had asked him something along the lines of how he felt about it, and he just kind of had a sour tone, almost, about being the bench guy. And I don't know if Brogdon's on this team next year. After being tossed in the trade rumors and then being yanked out, it seems like he may be back in them. It's kind of all over the place with him right now, but I don't know if he returns next year. I'm not married to Malcolm Brogdon. That, like I said, it was really fun to root for him this year. But the whole reason I brought him up was he, for the most part, had a really healthy season. At the end there, he kind of a flukier injury with his arm. Usually when a guy is injury prone, you see the lower body stuff, the ankles, the feet, the knees, stuff like that. You don't really see like that's just kind of a flukier thing. And it still wasn't so bad. I mean, he played through it, or at least tried to, and he regrettably so. I don't think he should have. And then obviously he went to the bench, but he had a pretty healthy season by his standards. I think largely because he had a much smaller role, 25 to 30 minutes a game. They told him, hey, go out there, get buckets for half an hour, but that's it. That's it. You're never going to start. You're seldom going to close games. You're just going to be a bucket getter and not play 40 minutes a night. You're just not going to. And your minutes are going to be lighter. You're going to be playing against team second units. And he thrived in that role, and his body was probably pretty thankful for that. Same thing here with Porzingis. Obviously, Porzingis is not going to come off the bench. I saw somebody float that idea, and I thought that was asinine. That was nuts. Porzingis has not come off the bench for one game in his NBA career, even as a rookie. And he's not about to do that now. A 23-8 guy who shoots it with that level of efficiency and is, how would I classify him as a defender? Certainly above average. I wouldn't call him a great defender. He's not that, but he is certainly above average and is more than serviceable as a rim protector, just given his size alone. But his footwork on defense is great. He ranks insanely high in all these like second spectrum and all these advanced stats. He guards the pick and roll amongst the best as far as bigs go in this league. And the Celtics, I don't know if you've ever watched them play the Warriors, or a team that just runs pick and roll to death. They are terrible at that. And Al Horford, understandably so, has lost multiple steps on defense over the years. Even just 2 years ago when the Celtics had Udoka and had the league best defense, Horford was a huge part of that. And now he's cratered. When he really needs to turn it on, he can as an isolation defender, but not for long stretches, and certainly not for an entire season. So the Porzingis side of things is really exciting. The smart side of things is really disappointing, really sad. I think it. I do think it had to happen. I do, and now that the emotions are removed from it to an extent, I can really say that safely because in the playoffs, when the Celtics were down 3-0 and they had no dog in them, it just made sense. It was just like this team. If Marcus is this team's fearless leader, if he is this team's heartbeat, how on earth did they get just absolutely fucking shellacked and go down 3-0, right? And at first, everybody was rebuking the trade and was like, "This team has no leader, no dog now." And it's like, where was that when if he was like, if he was all that at firing dudes up, how the hell did they go down 3-0 to the Heat, right? And I'm not downplaying Marcus's role as a leader at all. I mean, he certainly was that, but you also have to think about it from the perspective of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, admittedly, up until this point, were too young, too inexperienced in NBA locker rooms to really take on that leadership role. For years now, people have said, like, when is Tatum going to step up? When is Brown going to step up? When are they going to speak up and have that voice? One, we're not in that locker room. We don't see behind the scenes. Like, we do to an extent. We see the on-the-court stuff. And yes, both on the court, they can be pretty quiet. But you had Marcus Smart and you had Al Horford. Al Horford now still is kind of the wise old sage vet who's been there, done that in the locker room, on the floor. He's still going to be that vocal leader. He's still going to be that presence, but his career is changing. You know, he's going to be 37, 38 years old, and he knows he's in the twilight now. He's still going to be able to contribute to a winning team. He's still going to play meaningful minutes, but he knows it's time for things to change. He sees Tatum at 25. He sees Brown at 26. He sees those guys starting to enter the prime of their careers. And he's going to be able to take note and, help them, shape up and shape into the leaders that they're ultimately going to become. However, with Marcus Smart, Marcus has always viewed himself as equals with Brown and Tatum. And that's never been the case, obviously. From a talent perspective, from a value perspective on the floor, that's never been the case, obviously. But Marcus has been here the longest, and it's always kind of been his team, his city, his whatever. And that just, you're never going to be able to out-talk a Marcus Smart. You're never going to be able to have a voice bigger than him in a city that he's been in his whole career, or the team that he's been with his whole career. He was here before you guys, and therefore it's really hard to out-voice somebody like that, somebody so vocal, somebody so passionate. And we were so grateful for Marcus and everything he did. But if you're going to go into this Tatum Brown phase for the foreseeable future, and you want them to be able to take control of that locker room, well, then it kind of starts with removing the loudest voice in that room. And that's Marcus Smart. So it's a little bit of a new era for Boston, but not entirely. From a basketball perspective, Derek White was clearly the third best player on the Celtics throughout all of last season, all the way until the finish line. Struggled a bit in the playoffs at times, but ultimately, for the most part, he was phenomenal. And if I did get to a point where I was like, if Derek White's your third best player, just how good are you? And I felt pretty confident that he was capable of being the third best guy. When you think about his defensive impact, when you think about when he's really got the shot going, he's a knockdown three-point shooter. He's excellent as a defensive guard. I believe he led the league in blocks as a guard last season. His impact cannot be understated. And Marcus, despite winning Defensive Player of the year prior, I don't know if he was playing hobbled, if he was, if there was different things, this or that. I'm not going to sit here and say he was out of shape. I mean, I just don't know what it was, but Marcus just didn't have that same quickness, that same game-changing defensive ability. He just didn't. And I don't know for whatever reason that was, but it just wasn't there this season. And he's taken strides every single season as a playmaker, as a shooter. He used to be a just awful shooter. And now I actually really was pretty comfortable with him when he would take shots. There was this thing with Marcus where the ball somehow almost always found him in a big moment. In a big moment, the ball pretty much always found him. And there was times where that really paid off, and there's times where it's just like, God dang it, I just wish the ball ended up in Tatum's hands. I just wish the ball ended up with Jalen. And I don't know what that was. I'm not going to sit here and say Joe Mazzulla was drawing up plays for Marcus Smart to close games, but it goes beyond the Joe Mazzulla thing. It just always kind of felt like Marcus was not, of course he was always on the floor, but just felt like the ball was always working its way to him. And I just don't know if that's the guy you want taking those shots, especially when you have 2 All-NBA guys on your roster. But I feel so many different things about it, but now I'm able to look at it with a clearer mindset, and I'm super, super excited for the Porzingis era. I am also really excited that Joe Mazzulla has a tremendous supporting cast now. Charles Lee from the Bucks. It's probably not. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say that's not talked about enough in an NBA offseason that's already been kind of bonkers. But in Celtics circles, at least, we should really be excited for that, because Charles Lee is the lead assistant for Milwaukee and has been a finalist for so many head coaching jobs over the past couple seasons. And he's now going to take the lead assistant role in Boston. Maybe there's a part of him that's salivating at the hope that maybe he gets the head coaching job at some point. I don't think that's really the case, though. I mean, because at any point in time, he's probably going to be free to leave and go take a head coaching job somewhere else. But he probably saw from afar that this team desperately needed another voice on that bench, and he probably looks at it as a chance to really demonstrate his coaching chops. And I'm excited for it, because this team was depleted on the bench. They lose Udoka. They hire Mazzulla. The job is thrown into his lap a day before media day or training camp or what have you. The loss of Damon Stoudemire halfway through the season. I think he was the lead assistant after everything that had occurred. And so he's out. He goes to coach, was it Wake Forest? One of those college basketball teams. I don't keep up with college basketball. But he leaves midway through the season. Will Hardy goes to coach the Utah Jazz last summer. And so all of a sudden, some of the biggest voices on your bench are out the window, gone. And then you have rookie Joe Mazzulla, kind of just with a couple of assistants who, are kind of thrown into the mix as well. And that had to be really difficult and really tough. And so you get Charles Lee, you get Sam Cassell. Sam Cassell, notorious players guy. This guy is excellent with player development. Guys really respect him. He obviously played for the Celtics. He's won titles as a player, as a coach. Just going to be a great voice to have on the bench, in the locker room, somebody to help Joe Mazzulla out. I'm just excited for the offensive creativity that this team could have next year. We all know about Mazzulla ball, all the three-pointers, all the offensive wizardry that we saw last year, but this team has needed a new wrinkle offensively, because they really did live and die by the three at points during that playoff run, and oftentimes we saw them die. Getting Porzingis, who is a tremendous three-point shooter, but really can open up a lot of opportunities there. He was one of the highest or one of the most efficient players on post-ups last season. I think he was towards the top with Nikola Jokic, right? And I'm not calling him Jokic. I'm not calling him a top 10 player. I'm not calling him anything like that. I'm not calling him a top 2 or 3 center in the NBA. I'm not doing any of that. But he does bring some offensive versatility that this team has not had. Really, and I mean, this team has really never had a 7-footer who played meaningful minutes, and especially no center who's been this offensively talented, skilled, versatile in this era. I mean, the last great big man who was able to open up the offensive floor like this was, like, seriously, Kevin Garnett. And that was a long time ago, my friend. And Porzingis is a 7'3", get it however he can, player, and I'm really excited. And I've spent 30 minutes talking about it, but it's easily the most exciting thing, or the thing that I'm most invested in, most passionate about. Gonna take a break. I think I've said all I need to say on it. I'm sure there's going to be something that happens with the Celtics here, probably this way. I mean, obviously we're waiting on the Jaylen Brown extension. I don't think that's as big of a deal as people thought. I did think that he was probably going to put pen to paper pretty quickly, but this is not uncommon at all for these huge deals like this, especially ones that, like, there's no rush, there's no concern, there's no worry about getting a deal done. It's the Supermax. It's Supermax money. It's 5 years. There could be, I mean, I could see a world where they agree to a long-term deal that's a little bit less than the full, I think it's 295. It could be less than that, or I could see maybe an opt-out after like year 3 because there's going to be like a TV rights deal. And maybe Jaylen truly does just want some flexibility a little bit sooner than later. Who knows? But I do know that if he signs his 5-year max, then he's ineligible to be traded for an entire season. And we would have a lot more clarity on at least what this team's going to look like going into next year. I don't think there's any world in which Jaylen is traded before this season. Everybody is talking about this Damian Lillard thing. And of course, the Celtics constantly come up in all these trade things because they have the assets to do moves like that. But I'm just going to quickly put those to bed. Damian Lillard does not want to be in Boston. The Celtics do not want to trade Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown, currently, as of right now, has 1 year left on his deal. And Portland would not trade for a guy who's got 1 year left on his deal without further commitment. And I don't foresee Jaylen Brown committing long-term to Portland. Just given the track record there with Portland and stars and free agents, just don't really see it. I personally do not want to trade Jaylen Brown. If, of course, I would trade, I'll trade him for the right player, the right package, but there's so few options out there, and approximately zero players that I would trade Jaylen Brown for that are available. Okay? The list that I would trade Jaylen Brown for is extremely short. I did not want to trade him for Kevin Durant last year. What makes you think I want to trade him for Jaylen Brown or trade him for Damian Lillard now, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, and I felt like people were really passionate about, we're not trading Brown for Durant. Like, there was obviously a pretty big crowd that wanted to do it. But it felt like the overwhelming majority was like, we're not trading Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant. And then you fast forward a year, Jaylen Brown is better in this season. Obviously, the Game 7 is still sitting in our minds, and it wasn't just Game 7. He struggled a lot in the postseason. But last summer, he had a pretty good finals. It wasn't perfect, wasn't tremendous, but he had a pretty good NBA finals, and people were like, oh my God, why would we break this up? And then you flash forward to now, and the freshest thing in our minds with Jaylen is the underperforming in the Game 7. And now everybody's like, oh, we'll trade him for Dame. No. Recency bias is a hell of a thing. Don't fall victim to it. Damian Lillard at the start of next season will be 33. Jaylen Brown will be turning 27. Don't get caught up in these things. And I know Damian Lillard probably has 2 to 3. I mean, I don't know what I want to say really great. I think he's got 1 to 2 really great seasons left. And I think he's probably going to be, he's going to be around for a while, for quite a bit longer. I think he is going to age well, probably better than most guards, because he does have, he's just got such tremendous shooting ability. I think he's the second or third best shooter in the league, however you want to rank him. But yeah, at this point, I'm just not doing it. And the Celtics aren't doing it. And the Celtics might just not have done the deal yet just because they might just be waiting to see what happens with certain things. I'm not a cap expert. I know more or less a lot like about what they can and can't do. But they're still waiting on this Grant Williams thing, which I would, at this point, I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't return next season. At least, I mean, he may not be here long term, but next season, I feel like going into next season, he's on the Celtics because a lot of these guys have inked deals elsewhere. There's still the Dallas possibility. They're still pretty interested, I think. So we'll see what happens there. Is it a sign and trade? I think it has to be because I think Dallas is capped out after signing Kyrie. But if you maybe say, decide now, I'd say he's a Celtics next year. I think he's really important to the team. A lot of defensive versatility, knockdown shooter. And I think the Celtics are going to really value continuity. And after losing Marcus Smart, Grant is a known fan favorite and also player favorite. He and Tatum have their pregame routine ritual. They were at the Patriots training camp or whatever. They were doing a thing with Fanatics or whatever, but they were representing Boston, right? And I think Grant would like to be back. I feel like he's said all the right things so far in this free agency. But we'll see. I think if Grant was dead set on leaving, he would have probably been negotiating a deal elsewhere by now. Even though he's a restricted free agent, I think there's probably a lot of open communication between him and Boston. And it could be that, that could be one of the reasons that Jalen hasn't signed yet. So we'll see. We'll see what all happens with the Celtics. I've now spent almost 40 minutes on the Celtics. But don't worry, there's going to be timestamps, and I'll link you to the Damian Lillard stuff and all that. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then we're going to talk a little bit more of NBA free agency before we get out of here. So on day one of NBA free agency, we were already blessed with some pretty awesome news. Our first Woj bomb, if you will. Damian Lillard has requested out of Portland. We've already spoken about it a little bit here. But let's just walk ourselves through what a trade for Dame looks like. Damian Lillard I hold Dame in very high regard, right? Top 12 to 15 player in this league. Second to only Steph as far as point guards go. And yes, I think Luka's better than him. I don't know what you would call Luka. But you get it. I hold Dame in a super high regard, and I think he's insanely valuable. He is probably most valuable to the city of Portland, just given, his relationship there, how long he's been there. He really is the face of that franchise and will go down as one of the two best Blazers ever, him and Clyde, however you want to rank it. I haven't taken a look at it. But you get it. And now with the trade news, where everybody, you would think that he's already in a Heat jersey, right? Seems like that's where he wants to be, and obviously there's mutual interest there. Miami just went to the NBA Finals, but notoriously they were a Cinderella team. They did steal a game off of Denver, made everybody believe for a moment that they could do it. But in reality, they just didn't have enough. I have no clue why on God's green earth that Portland would trade Damian Lillard to Miami for any reason besides just, doing right by Dame. And look, I don't discount that. That's a relationship that they built up over a decade. You want to do right by your stars, right? It is the right thing to do. And, it looks, I guess it looks good to agents and free agents in the future, but Portland's never going to be a free agent destination. This is Portland. You get good through the draft and through trades. That is how you get good. And so I'm not saying they should exile him to Detroit or Charlotte or Houston or whatever. But they should really, Damian should want to also do right by Portland. And they should want to work together on something that makes sense for both sides. What the hell is Miami going to send back to Portland that's going to make sense without draining their title odds, right? And I'm probably higher on Tyler Hero than most. I think he's an outstanding shooter. I think he has good size as a two guard. I think depending on where he ends up, he could kind of try to transition into being more of a point guard, being a bit more on the ball, hopefully develop as a playmaker, yada, yada, whatever. Tyler Hero is a good player, but doesn't fit with Portland, right? Doesn't really fit there. They just drafted Scoot Henderson. They have Anthony Simons. They have Shadon Sharp, who Sharp is a little bit bigger, doesn't really play the same role, but they have these younger guys who they want to develop, and they want to develop quickly. And Tyler Hero, I just don't think fits in that backcourt. I don't think he fits very well in that backcourt. I don't know, say what you will, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Also, Tyler Hero is not good enough to be the centerpiece of a trade for Damian Lillard, regardless of fit. And then you would say, well, what if Miami sent back a ton of draft capital? That's worthless to Portland at this point. Miami is always good. They're never the best team in the league, outside of when they had LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. But they're never bad. They're never a team that is turned on by tanking. They're never going to be. As long as Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra are there, they're going to want to win. And for so long as Dame, Jimmy, and Bam are going to be there, that's going to be a really good team. It's going to be a team that is, in the top half of the Eastern Conference. At least I would expect, right? And so for the next few years, you have to look at those picks as late first rounders, right? Like, not really going to get the best return on your investment there. If you're going to trade Damian Lillard, you have to exercise multiple options, not all options. Like I said, he's not going to like Charlotte, right? He's not going to even a place like Orlando, but there needs to be a discussion about where else he could go. And he needs to be cooperative in this and in that. And I know Miami, like, who wouldn't want to play in Miami? I've never been to Miami. It doesn't really seem like my type of place, but by all accounts, players obviously over the years have chosen to play in Miami. They love it there. They have a great culture as far as their team goes. Heat culture, we all know about it. It's the reason they made the finals. But I just have a hard time believing that is anywhere close to the best that they could do for Dame. Now Damian is locked up on a long-term deal. That obviously doesn't mean anything. Like, he could get traded to a team and then ask out a year later. So a team that trades for him has to truly believe that they would have a shot at keeping him. I just don't buy it, man. And so a lot of their most recent reports say that there would almost certainly be a third team involved. Does that mean there's a team like a younger team like San Antonio who's got a lot of cap space still? Are they the team that takes on Hero? Or do they send stuff out to Portland? Do they send stuff out to Miami? Like, what does adding a third team to a Miami deal look like? How does it benefit Portland? I don't know. I just would keep an eye on it. Dame has forever been, been the loyal guy, been the guy who wants to do right by his team, by the team that drafted him. And so I just don't know that I could see him turning his back and be like, I won't go anywhere else. Trade me to Miami or don't, or I'm going to sit out, right? Like, I don't foresee us getting to that point. So I just wouldn't quite rule it out that he gets moved elsewhere. Now, by the end of this podcast, by the time it gets uploaded, he could very well be in Miami. we'll see. It just depends on what Portland really thinks about Tyler Hero or any other assets they might get back if a third team entered the deal. Just right now, it's just hard to see a pathway forward where that's just there, where Portland's just going to be wowed, just be taken aback by a deal. This also leads me to talk a little bit about Miami. Miami has lost 2 starters so far in free agency. I'm not like saying Gabe Vincent and Max Strus are incredible players, but and they certainly did get, Strus certainly got overpaid. $64 million for Strus is just asinine. I actually like the Gabe Vincent deal for the Lakers. They got him for 3 years for $33. I think that's pretty good money for. I think it's a good deal for LA, and I think it's good money for Vincent. If I was Miami, I would have tried to keep him for that. And it looks like they tried to give him the same money, but with an extra year. So ultimately, of course, he'd be making considerably less on the annual average salary. But you're losing 2 starters. If you trade Tyler Hero, you're losing a third. And so all the continuity of this team that made it to the NBA Finals is gone. I mean, outside of, your 2 most important pieces, Jimmy and Bam. And then, if you get Dame and you're able to fill out the rest of that roster with, like I said, Miami's a desirable place to live. There's going to be guys. We already see guys like Eric Gordon signing with Phoenix. That's, once again, that's a nice place to live, and it's going to be a team that's in the mix for the title. So Miami absolutely could be another city where some of these guys who get bought out or what have you would look to sign there. And so I have no doubts they could fill out a roster. They could, Pat Riley's going to throw his rings down on the table and, lure Bismack Biyombo to come play there or whatever. Too bad Jock Landale got locked up, or they could have brought him. If you end up getting Dame, it's all worth it. But if you don't, you've now lost 2 starters. You've tossed Tyler Hero into every freaking trade rumor over the past 2 or 3 seasons. And if you don't get the big fish, yikes. Because that free agent market is, it's getting wiped up quick. I mean, it's cleaning up quick. Guys are signing. They put pen to paper fast these days, man. With all the freaking tampering in place, come July 1, it's just a matter of putting pen to paper. No doubt about it. If they don't get Damian Lillard, they're going to be a lot thinner. They're going to have to figure some stuff out on the fly. Now, if any team's going to do that, it's going to be Miami. They have Pat Riley. They have Spo. They're a very smart organization. And we've seen them turn nobodies into somebodies overnight. I have no doubts they have G Leaguers, undrafted players in their cloning facilities right now with superhuman serum, getting juiced up for next season. And then that's how they claim these guys are real people. They're like, oh, they were undrafted. Where'd they come from? Oh, don't worry about it. Oh, okay. That's kind of how all these Miami guys pop up. So they're out here cloning dudes. They're building NBA players in the lab somewhere, and then calling them undrafted. I don't know. If I'm Miami, I just would not be like locking myself into. I would not be just dreaming about the NBA Finals repeat just yet. I would just pump the brakes a little bit. Just pump the brakes a little bit. That's all I'm going to say on that. What's my most favorite team that Dame could go to? Thank you for asking. Probably San Antonio. Like, obviously that's a place, that's another team that's just not going to happen. Although there was like this thing, I guess Ramona Shelburne, you broke the news on ESPN or whatever, and she was like, well, he has such deep respect for the Spurs organization and Coach Pop. It's like, yeah, who doesn't? But it doesn't mean I want to go play in San Antonio with, where the best player is going to be a rookie. Now, who knows? San Antonio does have the chops to put together a great deal, but I don't know if they're interested in doing that. However, I know who is, and that's Popovich. Popovich does not want to do this for another 10 years probably, and he probably looks at Wembanyama and, you probably have to throw in a Vassell or a Keldon Johnson, as well as obviously a ton of picks. But he's probably looking at Dame, like licking his chops. He's probably already called him, like, hey, Miami is cool, but San Antonio, you can come here. We got breakfast tacos, and it's also, it's hot here. We don't have any beaches or, babes or anything like that. But, yeah, you can come here, have tacos with Wembanyama, and, we can go do dinner and stuff. It would be the first time he's recruited or lured a Portland star. Remember when he got Aldridge? Called up LaMarcus Aldridge, brought him to San Antonio, took him to a nice dinner. And the next day he was a Spur. So, the LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan days, they were fun. They were fun in San Antonio. But better times are upon us, and I get to go watch Victor Wembanyama every night at the AT&T Center this fall. So I'm really excited about that. That's enough on Dame. We just don't have any other news with him. It kind of just seems like we're at a stalemate and you know why? Because Miami has given them their best offer, and Portland's shaking their head like, that's it. That's not going to be enough. So, this league is crazy. There could be a trade by the end of tonight. There could be a trade next month. There's really no rush to get this done. We're still several months from the start of the NBA season, and anything could happen. And if I was Dame, I'd really stop posting all these goodbyes on Instagram. He's like sharing all these stories of people saying bye, and it's like, dude, if it's Miami or bust, there's a good chance you bust and you just talk yourself back into Portland, because every time that we've bubbled up for a trade request, now granted, this is the first time that he's ever made a request, but every time we've gotten to this point, he's always decided and talked himself back into going back to Portland. And Jeremy Grant just signed a ridiculous contract to return. And say what you will, I mean, I don't think the Scoot Henderson thing is a good fit, but he could talk himself into it. Like, I just would pump the brakes if I'm Dame before I go on Twitter and Instagram saying goodbye, it's been amazing. Like, just chill, because there's a chance, a small chance, that he does not return. And no, the Celtics are not trading for Damian Lillard. We're done. We already talked about that. Let's take a quick break. I'll talk a little bit about the Bradley Beal thing and the Suns, and just anything else we're looking forward to in this NBA free agency. Before there was ever a Damian Lillard trade request, before we launched ourselves into the deep end of free agency, we had Bradley Beal. We had Bradley Beal traded to the Phoenix Suns for absolutely nothing. Actually, that's not true. The pick swaps there are absolutely terrifying and devastating for Phoenix. And that's not being talked about, and I get it. Phoenix here is in a situation where they can launch themselves into title contention. And if you get even just one title with Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, you don't care about picks or pick swaps. That's how I always feel about these things. If you just get one, it doesn't even matter. If you get multiple, it certainly doesn't matter what happens next. However, you've decided to go in on a big three, and I'll call it that. That's fine. It's a big three of guys who do the exact same thing. Okay? I just don't know if that bodes well. Three guys who are exceptional shooters, exceptional in the mid-range, exceptional as shot creators for themselves. They're definitely are all probably about the same level as far as playmakers for others. I would rank them, as far as playmaking goes, I would go Durant 1. It doesn't matter. Like they're all on about the same tier. Durant still, I feel, is the best player there. Even though Booker was absolutely insane in this playoff run for the most part. Once again, kind of did not look great in that closeout game against Denver, but that's okay. Denver was scary, so that's fine. And it's an exceptional, like, these guys individually are awesome talents, but Durant is going to be 35, I believe. We know the injury history there. It's pretty nuts. It's starting to get pretty much out of hand here. He was hurt when he was traded to Phoenix, and then got hurt. Does some nasty damage to his ankle in a layup line, which is tough to say. Only plays 8 regular season games with the Suns last year. Still is not really integrated into that system. And then you trade for Bradley Beal, who is now 30 years old. That is not old, but he is no longer a spring chicken and has dealt with. He's got a pretty littered injury history now as well. And Devin Booker is, not injury prone, but also not the NBA's Iron Man, right? Like not really playing, not playing full seasons these days. And that's not to say he can't or won't. He's probably going to be the most reliable of the 3. But you've kind of gone in on 3 guys who do more or less the same stuff offensively and are not the most reliable bunch as far as injuries and health goes. Now, that being said, you had Chris Paul before, who, although his age is, he really took quite a few steps back this year. Obviously not the most reliable guy whatsoever. So if you're trading Chris Paul for Bradley Beal, yeah, I say go ahead and do it. But you also have to understand what you're doing as far as we have this new CBA, and I know those are everybody's favorite words. New CBA, second apron, new CBA. But really, it's going to be devastating here in a couple of years. I will give credit to the Suns for throwing the middle finger up at the new CBA and saying we don't give a shit. We're going to pay whatever it takes to have an awesome team. It's just that I don't know if this was the right route to take. Obviously, a big reason why they got Lillard or Beal is because of the no trade clause that Bradley Beal had, which to this day is absolutely ridiculous that he has that. I could not believe that his agent should, he is the GOAT, because nobody in the league has a fucking no trade clause. Not Steph, not Dame even, not Jokic, not Luka, not Tatum, not LeBron. Nobody does. Beal did. And that was ridiculous when it happened, when he signed that deal. But I don't think a lot of people knew that he did until he asked out this offseason. And then it became common knowledge, and people were like, what? He has no trade clause? They still do those? And then instantly that led into conversations about who now should have one. Hey, probably nobody. Who should have a no trade clause? Probably nobody. Probably, most likely, nobody should have a no trade clause. But whatever. So I'm not loving this big 3. And it could prove me wrong, and it could be incredible, but these are 3 guys who are heavy on the ball guys who Durant's getting older. He's still Kevin Durant. He's still a top 5 player in this league. Devin Booker is still Devin Booker. He's still incredible. And Bradley Beal, still awesome as well. However, something that should be, just noted about Bradley Beal is this decline he's had. Let's just run through it real quick. Last year, this most recent year, 2022-23, 50 games played, right? Like I said, not really the most reliable guy. 23 points a game. I'll give him this: 50% from the field, 36% from 3. Really good efficiency. The 5.4 assists a game. Love to see that. Year prior, 40 games. 2021, 2022, 40 games. 23 points a game, 45% from the field, 30% from 3. Was not a great shooter, really, at all in that season. But injuries and all things considered, that did not help him. Although that season he did average 4.7 rebounds, which is pretty high for him, and then 6.6 assists, which is really good for him. Really showed the flashes as a playmaker. Then you go to the 2020, 2021 season, 60 games played. There's a trend here: 50, 40, 60. This guy is a sucker for playing even number games in a season. This season was excellent. 31 points a game, 48% from the field, 35% from three, and then 4 rebounds, 4 assists. That was excellent. To drop off 7 whole points per game from 2021 to the last 2 seasons, that's not... It's actually 8 points a game because it was 31 points and then now it's 23. That's kind of a big deal. And it's not like the Wizards acquired some monumental talent. You know, at the end there was Porzingis, there was Kuzma. Those guys are definitely, obviously, really good. I just raved about how much I love Porzingis. But, you know, I don't know if that's just him taking the foot off the gas or what have you, but it just feels like if you're the guy on a bad team especially, you know, you need to be putting yourself into position to win by going and getting, 31 points a game. Because the year prior, 2019, 2020, 57 games played and 30 points a game. And that was a jump from the year prior, 25. So 23.2 points per game over the last 2 seasons is the lowest since the 2017-2018 season. And that was a long time ago, my friends. That was a long time ago. I was in high school at that point. I don't love it. And the last time he played a full season was 2018, 2019. You got to give him credit here. Those 2 seasons, 2017 through 2019, he played all 82 games both seasons. But then after that, 57, 60, 40, 50. It's been a while since he's played a full season. And that doesn't bode really well, especially when you go back to the beginning of his career. He didn't play a full season until 2017. He didn't play over 60 games. He's only played over 60 games. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 seasons out of his 1, 2, 3. Hey, look, I'm not gonna do this. Point being, not the most reliable tool in the shed. Okay, and I think people really jumped all over it and were like, oh my God, this is the craziest thing ever. It's like, no, it's not. Kevin Durant played for the fucking 2017 Warriors. That was the craziest thing ever. This is not that crazy. Give Phoenix credit. They are doing a pretty good job at finding guys to play for small deals. And they're going to be able to fill out a pretty nice roster, but they really still, even as of today, of course, there's a car horn blaring as I'm wrapping this show up. Let's pause. All right, car horn is gone. I just want to come to a head here with this Phoenix thing. It's just not everything that I think people are cracking it up to be. They're going to be in the mix, absolutely. One of the better regular season teams, I sure would hope so. Can they always have 2 of the best shot creators, 2 of like the 15 best shot creators, 2 of the maybe 10 best shot creators in the NBA on their floor? Yes. Outside of that, I don't know. Like, I like DeAndre Ayton. I don't love DeAndre Ayton. Do I think they should flip him for some rotation guys, maybe another center, maybe like an okay center? Because centers are a dime a dozen, honestly. And Ayton is not good enough, I think, to be making $32 million a year, especially when the money in Phoenix is that tight. I don't think it's a lock that he stays there. We'll see how things clear up. I feel like there's definitely a chance that he gets moved. I think he will have suitors. Because some team out there, they're going to think that's a deal. Maybe it's San Antonio. Maybe they're like, we put Aiden next to Wembanyama. We have these super tall guys. It's like Duncan and Robinson all over again. Maybe they just have so much cap space available. I don't know. They have some good rotation guys they could send out. Doug McDermott could fill out that Suns bench. I just kind of like that. I'm going to trade machine that. I'm going to trade machine Aiden to the Spurs. What's the biggest knock on Aiden? He ain't got no heart, no motor, doesn't give a shit. Well, you play for Coach Pop. You're gonna have to, or you're gonna be shown the door. Kind of like that. Could be career rejuvenation for the former number 1 pick. Nobody's talking about that. I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to do a trade machine session, and that's going to be the first thing that I do. All right. I'm entering the stages of delusion. All right. I told you guys I was going to keep Twitter open just in case something crazy happened, and Lonnie Walker has agreed to a deal with the Nets. So there's that. Justin Holiday, a deal with the Nuggets. If you think that's going to change the landscape of the NBA, well, there you go. There's been a whole flurry of deals that have happened, and it's just not worth talking about. And Bruce Brown signing with Indiana for an entire show, or Roche Brissett signing with the Celtics. Big money being handed out, though, right? Congrats to Tyrese Halliburton, LaMelo Ball, Sabonis got paid. These guys are getting paid crazy money, and then I just have to remember, I just have to remind myself, this is a different league. Money's different. And I'll tell you what, seeing these guys who are really good players, some of them are really good, get paid like that makes me feel way better about paying the Tatum Brown duo $600 million. I feel way better about it now than I did a few weeks ago. All in all, great show. Pat myself on the back to wrap it up. This is just the beginning. We're going to eventually probably see a Damian Lillard trade, and who else? Who knows? I feel like Karl Towns could be moved. I feel like Atlanta could be in the mix for something. DeJounte Murray, Trae Young. I doubt Trae Young gets traded, but we'll just keep your eyes out. New episodes coming. I'm going to have an opinion on everything. If the Celtics do anything, there might be an emergency pod, but I doubt the Celtics are going to do anything really thrilling or exciting, and I don't want them to, because that would suggest that Jaylen Brown is on the move, and I don't want that. Thanks for checking this out. If you made it to the end, you are loved, you are appreciated, you are phenomenal, you are sexy. We will see you next time. Peace.